Hey, thanks for coming back for video two. In example one in the book, they talk about some of these properties. Like, what were those, steps that I was doing over there? Well, I was adding something to both sides or subtracting something from both sides. In my opinion, it's kind of the same thing. I'm adding a negative 1.5 to both sides, right? And I didn't have my x up here. That would have been better to show that kind of work. 1.5x, right? So these are like terms, right? And when you add like terms, they simplify down. So now we have 0x's on the left side. And then I subtracted 10 from both sides. And that gave me 240 on the left, right? So I did another subtraction property of equality. Then I did multiplication property or division property, however you want to think about it. Like, I could multiply both sides by a half, or I could divide by 2. Now, I don't think we're going to have any of these where you have to list what property that you're doing over here. So like right here, I could call this, the subtraction property of equality. But what I'd like you to think about is that whatever you do to one side of the equation, if you do the same thing on the other side, 99.9% of the time in algebra, you're going to be okay. All right. So let's look at our problem over here and see, the different steps that they're doing and things that we're going to need to be aware of. So between this step and this step, I think they're just copying the problem down. I don't see any arithmetic being done or anything like that. It was like, here's our given problem. You copy the problem down to get started, right? That's like our given information. Then they're distributing the like they're multiplying 1/3 times 2, 1/3 times 57, 1/3 times 6, 1/3 times negative x, right? You got to distribute that through. I don't see that as one of the properties listed over here. It might be in the section, but the distributive property is very important. Okay, so we got to distribute. Then we're adding like terms right here. So I'm taking 1/3 or 2/3 minus 1/3. That gives us 1/3. We're adding the negative 19 and the 2. And we're not doing anything on the right side because the right side of the equation is pretty simple. I want you to take a moment and just ask yourself, what would you do next? Like on this problem right here, what would you do next? I hope you're saying add 17 to both sides. Let's see if that's what the author does. They added 17 to both sides. So when I add 17 to -4, I get a positive 13. Sometimes the arithmetic's a little tricky. Maybe you want to have Desmos open. Maybe negative signs don't cause you any problems. And then, how'd they do this? Well, you can multiply both sides by 3 right here. Let me just put that down because this might be the trickiest part of it all. So we could multiply this right here by 3, and then I multiply this side by 3. That's the multiplication property of equality. So the 3 times the 1/3 gives us a 1x, and 3 times 13 gives us a 39. So if one of these steps didn't make sense, I want you to, raise your hand while you're watching this, call me over, say, hey, how'd that happen? I think probably the most important one was the distributive property. They're multiplying these through. After that, I'd say adding like terms together, you got to have that down, right? That's where that positive 1/3 x comes from. I hope this feels like review to you. Would you try question 1 and 2, put the video on pause, and then come back after you've looked at 1 and 2 for me? And open up your assignment, see if you can get the right answer. Hey, thanks for putting the video on pause. Here's what I'm going to do on this problem. I'm going to, I don't have a whole lot of room here. Hopefully you can just ignore that X right there. But hopefully we can keep this nice and clear. So let me zoom in to give myself a little bit more space to write. All right. So how do we solve that equation? Well, you could subtract 6x from both sides, or you could add 9x to both sides. Probably most people feel comfortable adding 9x. Oh boy, I don't like that pen right now. So let me see if I can make that a little bit skinnier. Thanks for your patience. Let's drag this guy over a little bit. Okay. So if I add those like terms now, 6x and 9x, I get 15x. And if I add 9x to negative 9x, I have no 9x's on the right side, right? Okay, so how am I going to get rid of this -5? Well, I'm going to add 5 to both sides, and I end up with 15x equals 12, right? And then I'm going to divide by 15 on both sides here. So let's see if it lets me divide here by 15. So now let me move that up. And then if I divide both sides by 15, I end up with x equals 12/15. Now, I think if you put 12/15 in, it might count you wrong because 3 divides into 12, right? So that's the same thing as 3 times 4. And 3 goes into 15 5 times. So that's the same thing as 3 times 5. 15 is. And so the 3 divided by the 3 is 1. And now I'm down to 4/5. So I just reduced my fraction. If it says put your answer in as a decimal, then I would convert that to a decimal as 0.8. Okay, just divide 4 by 5 on Desmos, or hopefully you know 4/5 is 0.8. Okay, on question number 2, let's take a look and see if you did okay on question number 2. Well, let's see. I kind of survey the situation. I have an R over here on this side. I got a constant. I got a constant over here. I don't have an R on the other side. So I'm going to start by subtracting 5 from both sides. And now I've got negative 1.6 R equals 12.8. And don't drop the negative sign, right? It's a negative 12.8. Now I'm going to divide by 1.6, negative, I should say. So I'm dividing by negative 1.6 and dividing by negative 1.6. I'm not sure how much work to show you guys how comfortable you are with this. Some of you are saying, oh, this is easy. And some of us are going, oh my goodness, I don't remember any of this stuff. So at this point, right, probably open up Desmos. Maybe that decimal makes you uncomfortable. So we go Desmos and we type into Desmos. No, well, do you need to type in the negatives? I always leave things off if I feel like I don't need to put them on, because a negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive, right? So I'm going to simplify this guy down to 12.8 divided by 1.6. The fewer keystrokes I put in, I think the less chance I have of making mistakes. It's just less stuff I have to type in. So I ended up with 8, positive 8, okay? Don't put a negative 8. You're going to get it wrong because we're dividing a negative by a negative. That's going to give us a positive. All right? Thanks for watching my video.